Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle podcast. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode number 143. I hope everybody's having a great week out there. Hope you're enjoying the nice spring weather. I know we certainly are over here at the world headquarters of the Drum Shuffle podcast. We have a great interview for you today. I am joined by just a phenomenal drummer, a great guy. The great Dan Schnelle will be joining us right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, we're about to be joined by Dan Schnelle. Dan is a New York native, now making his home out in sunny Southern California. And Dan is stepping out as his first album out as the composer and leader. That album is called Shine Thru. It is a fantastic listen. And Dan and I talked for almost an hour and a half, and we touched on basically everything, not only the album, but education, the importance of getting that education, playing in different scenarios. Dan is just a wealth of information, and if you're not familiar with his playing, get hip quick, because this cat has got it, whatever it is. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Dan Schnelle. Good afternoon, Dan. How are things going?
Things are good. I've got a nice cloudy Thursday afternoon in Los Angeles instead of saying the usual sunny Los Angeles, and all's well.
Well, it doesn't make me feel quite as bad. Here in central Kentucky, we went from, 75 yesterday, I want to say, and today it's about 45. So big difference in weather for us. We're ready for spring, for sure.
Yeah, we kind of had spring last week. It was super hot and really nice here. And then all of a sudden we just got like a huge downpour on Monday, which we need. Don't get me wrong. California needs all the rain it can get.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to come back to spring weather for us, which is like 60s, maybe 70s in the afternoon. Because everybody thinks California is so awesome. And then you're here in August and it's 100 degrees for like 8 days straight. You're like, oh boy.
Yeah, for sure. It's we can get into global warming if you want and solve that as drummers.
If we could solve that, I would love to tackle that, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's probably going to be beyond my show. That's for sure. Speaking of which, man, welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Thanks so much for taking time to come on and talk with us and have a drum hang. I think we're going to have a good time today.
I am honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. The honor's all ours. As is my tradition here on the show, we typically try to start, at the very beginning, just so any of my listeners that are unfamiliar with, I think it's always cool to get the backstory. So talk to us a little bit. You're not a native Californian. You grew up in New York, if I'm reading this correct. So talk to us a little bit about growing up, how you got into music and drumming. Do you come from a musical family?
Kind of. There's quite a few musicians in my family, but not like serious professional musicians. I have a cousin who's the exact same age as me, and she is a really fantastic cello player, and she's a music teacher. My mom is a singer. She probably has perfect pitch, but doesn't know it, because she seems to always know like the starting note of every song. And my dad really wanted to play the drums, but his dad just basically said no, which I think, so in like first, second grade, I just really wanted to play drums. I don't remember having any like specific impetus for it. Like I saw this show or something like that. It was more just like I wanted to do it. I was set up in like the corner of our L-shaped couch with like the classic pots and pans and 5-gallon buckets and stuff like that. And I think because my grandfather said no to my dad, I think that was kind of my dad being like, yeah, you want to do it? Let's do it. And, I did music in elementary school, which I have an 8-year-old daughter, so I'm aware of how things are very different now in elementary school versus when I was there. But, growing up in New York on Long Island, we had a great program in elementary school. I did concert band. I did a lot of auxiliary percussion. I was doing like all county and all state stuff for drum set, for timpani. So I was in early and like really all about it. Funny enough, when I auditioned in elementary school, they wanted me to be a violinist because they thought I didn't have good rhythm, and they said I had better melodic retention, which is really hilarious. But, that's how things go.
Yeah.
And then I started taking lessons pretty early on. So I was always like really great with sight reading, like classical percussion stuff, especially snare drum, and learned all my rudiments. But and then I studied a lot in high school. I studied with a really fantastic drummer named Al Miller, who kind of came out of he was good friends with Buddy Rich, and came out of like the kind of military and big band side of drumming. So he got me pretty well together in my hands, but I don't feel like I really blossomed musically until college. Also, right before I went to college, Al Miller had already hooked me up with Jim Chapin, so I had taken a couple of lessons with Jim Chapin, and who is, kind of like a drum idol to some people, especially in the teaching world. And then from Jim, I actually jumped to another incredible teacher, Dom Famularo, and with him we started working on, just more like expanding my technique and my comfort at the drum set. But again, none of that was really music related much. So I left New York to go to USC in Los Angeles, thinking like all of my favorite drummers at the time, I didn't know them as jazz drummers because I wasn't yet listening to much jazz, but I was listening to like Steve Gadd and Vinnie Colaiuta and Lenny White, but I didn't understand like the lineage that they had really gone through. I just knew that they studied jazz. So I thought, oh, I should go to school for jazz, not knowing entirely what I was getting myself into. So yeah, that's kind of like the start of it all. And then moving out here to Los Angeles and going to USC for the Thornton School of Music was kind of a big life shift. Obviously a life shift in moving thousands of miles away from my family, but also just in like completely new musical context for everything, and having to basically relearn a lot of the things that I learned as a younger student of the music and of the drums, and like learn the purpose of them, not just them anymore, but like, how can I use this thing? Why did I learn this thing if I don't know how to use it? You know, like rudiments are so great, but if you can only play them on a drum pad, they don't take you very far, you know? So it was at USC that I feel like I really kind of got a lot more music and blossomed a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I'm one of those but why guys, you know, and if the answer is just because, it drives me bananas. So, you know, I'm, you know, I guess, you know, down here in the South, we would say I was a willful child, you know, and drumming was a rebellion for me. And, you know, looking back, you know, I wish I had, you know, furthered my education, you know, instead of, you know, Led Zeppelin 3 side 2, you know, I mean, that's kind of, you know, I guess that's kind of my bibliography. But, you know, you mentioned a couple of huge names, you know, obviously Chapin, huge name. Dom is now like the international drumming ambassador of everything, you know, and just such a kind soul. So you had a couple of really big, you know, names there in your formal training, which I think is huge. And that is, you know, bound to set you on some sort of path. Now, I'm curious, being a New York guy, how you didn't look at, and maybe you did, but how you didn't look at, you know, Eastman or Berkeley and all those places. Was college non-negotiable in your family?
I don't know if it was non-negotiable, but I guess a good maybe asterisk to put on this was that I have 3 older brothers, all of whom basically encouraged me to get out of where we were. Okay. Because it was like, okay, we live in New York. We grew up in New York. We have the energy and the understanding of that. And go see something else and see what it's like. You can always move back is kind of how I remember my brother Brian very specifically kind of telling me that. And I remember his exact line was, "Go west, young man, go west." Like I remember that hilariously clearly. And that his point was just go try something different and see what happens. And I got into some other schools for different things. I was still on the fence. Like I was thinking about going to school for veterinary medicine and minoring in music. And then I had some like easy schools that wanted me to come there for like business degrees and stuff like that with full scholarships. And I remember having the conversation with my dad. I was just like, if I don't go for it right now, I'll probably regret it and never have the opportunity. And if I hate going to music school, I can always change my major and do something else. But I gotta, like, I just had, especially, funny enough, you bring it up, I studied with Dom for probably like 5 or 6 months at the end of my senior year of high school and the whole summer before going to USC. And he was the first person that made me like kind of actually think like, oh, maybe I could actually just play drums and music.
Yeah.
Like maybe that is viable, you know? My dad is now retired, but New York police officer. And so like, you know, he's a little bit more conservative. It's like, oh, you should get a job that has benefits and blah, 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 you know, as opposed to being a musician that's just out on their own and, you know, responsible for everything in life. But I just kind of got that feeling, and especially with Dom's push too, was like, you know, take your opportunity. This is it. If you don't, you'll never know. And I didn't even apply to Manhattan School or to the New School or to Berkeley. They weren't really thoughts to me.
Okay.
I don't know why. Also, I went to a private Catholic all-boys high school, which is also conservative. And that's funny enough, that's where Al Miller taught. That's why I went. That's why I chose to go to the school. Like I applied to the private high school to go study with Al. And yeah, I was the first person from the high school to go past the Rockies, to go that far west.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah. And so like, you know, it's a Catholic school. They're sending a lot of kids to like all Ivy League schools. It's like one of the best rated high schools in the country. So, so it was I'm very thankful for my education, but it was, they certainly weren't trying to push me out the door to go to music school.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. So as a lifelong, and we've got to talk at least a little bit of football here. Okay. Because I'm a huge football guy, and as a lifelong Notre Dame fan, okay, you ended up at USC, which, you know, I'm a little bit disappointed that somebody didn't talk to you about this ahead of time. You know, I kid, but you say you went to a kind of a conservative Catholic all boys high school. When you said, hey, I'm going to go to USC and go to Thornton, did anybody raise their eyebrows towards you at all? I'm just curious.
Oh, how about all of them? Raise their eyebrows at me?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I couldn't even tell you how many kids, like, I mean, I had a huge graduating class of, geez, it was a lot of kids. It was like 400 or something kids in my grade.
Okay.
And a large percentage of them went to Notre Dame, went to Villanova, you know, went to just schools that are, yeah, it's like a pipeline, you know, it's like continuing the same style and thought process of education.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the place that I grew up, you know, the early years of my life was, you know, in a place that you can't find on a map, you know, in South Central Kentucky. I thought, you know, dairy farming was going to be my life, you know, or,
all right,
you know, or learning how to ride horses, you know, I mean, that's just kind of what it is around here. Or, you know, you go to the University of Kentucky for ag, you know, and learn the right way to be a farmer kind of thing. Yeah. I didn't have that in me. Like, I just didn't see myself, you know, taking over the family land. That was never even a thought. Like, I had to explore music. And And as I didn't end up in college right away, kind of after I graduated high school, it was LA, Nashville, or death, right? That was going to be one of the things that happened to me. And I chose the third, death. I jumped in a van with, 4 of my best buddies, and we were like, hey, we're going to make it, kind of thing.
Yeah, let's get on the road.
Exactly. Let's hit the road. And I wouldn't change anything about my upbringing or, trying to do something, grandiose, at least in my own head. But, as a lifelong Notre Dame football fan, I hate USC. I have to, but it's one of the greatest schools out there, and my wife and I, we have a 17-year-old daughter who's, deeply in the arts. And, she said, well, she says to me all the time, my wife, she was like, what if she wants to go to film school at USC? Would you allow it? And, I jokingly say, absolutely not, but I would, I think,
especially because it's an incredible film school.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, we kind of, I don't know, and I'm not trying to get political here, but we tend to divide up into our tribes, even as kids now, I feel like it's not a clique thing. I think it's this is where I belong. This is what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, to hell with you, whatever. You moved literally all the way across the country, but you got to study with people like Peter Erskine, who's been a guest on this show, who is, I think, one of the most inquisitive jazz minds I've ever come across, ever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So when I interviewed Peter, I was scared to death because he's Peter, and he completely flipped the script on me, and I felt like I was being interviewed, because,
interesting.
Oh yeah. Because, I'm not a jazz player. I love jazz music, but I can't play it to save my life. Not that would pass any, discerning ear. They would know I was faking it immediately. And Peter was like, well, why do you think that is? Because I told him that. And, he was like, oh, well, that's going to change for you. We all come back to jazz, as drummers. You're going to be back here, I just thought it was amazing. And I'm assuming studying out there in that school, you got to ask a lot of the same questions, right?
Yeah, I guess. I don't think that I can speak to that the same way, only because I feel like I was just that, I was hungry, but I was young and dumb. And maybe in 20 years, I would still say the same thing about where I am now. But I wasn't, when I showed up there, Peter is now in charge of the whole entire drum department at USC. But when I was studying there, he was still just like faculty. And so he was really busy, and he was in and out on tour all the time, and he didn't teach at the school. You would, drive to his house to go get lessons. And he just had a limited roster that he could teach. So I didn't even get to study with him until I was a junior there.
Oh, okay.
And so I interacted with him, and I got to meet him, and I got to watch him play, and we got to have lots of conversations. But, it's different when you're in a room full of all of the other kids that are jazz majors. And, he's fielding lots of questions from lots of different people. And you didn't really have that personal connection until you're like in a room with him by yourself. quite a few times. And then suddenly, then the personal rapport kind of opens up a lot more. But so when I was there, some people are also all about like, when I'm at school, I really want to study with Peter. I want to study with Peter for all 4 years. I want to get everything out of him that you can. And I kind of looked at it the opposite way. I was kind of like, I'm in school for 4 years. I want to study with as many different people as I can and get as much information as I can.
Yeah.
So I studied my freshman year. I studied the whole year with Ndugu Chancellor.
Wow.
And I did not like totally understand the entire career of his at the time. I knew of him as like Michael Jackson, right? Thriller, playing on all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I walk in and the first lesson had like nothing to do with playing the drums like that. It was like he like pulled out a Wilcoxon piece and asked me to play it as quietly as humanly possible on the snare drum. And I was just like, oh God. And he was like, that wasn't quiet.
We're going to learn here today, son.
Yeah, exactly. And then my sophomore year, I studied with Aaron Surfati. Aaron is from Venezuela, and he still teaches at USC. He also used to teach at CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, which is a great school out here. And he very fittingly runs like the Latin Jazz Ensemble, which they call Alage. And he is an incredible drummer, but he's also an incredible percussionist, bongo, congas, everything. And that was my second year of studying with him, learning a lot of just Afro-Cuban music and getting into that. And I played in Alage with him that second year. Then my junior year, I studied with Erskine, and that was its own incredible year of study. And, with Peter, it was interesting because it was a lot about editing, learning to edit yourself, learning to like play something, listen back to it and make kind of back to your, how do you say it before, the but why question?
Yeah.
It's like, that's cool that you can play that, but why? Why did you play that? Did it have anything to do with the music? So Peter was as much as he was giving me interesting things and, patterns, comping things and sight reading things to work on, I feel like a lot of the lessons were coming back to conceptual ideas of like, well, what do you think fits here? And what do you think would set up this song the best? And that's cool that you played that, but then when you played that, like the tempo felt funny right here, or it didn't feel like you really meant to play that, those kinds of concepts. And then my fourth year, I moved from Peter with the concept of I was saying before, it's like I want to get the most from as many people as possible. So my fourth year, I studied with Terry Lynn Carrington, and I also studied with Alan Pasqua at the same time because I had like open credit in my course schedule. I kind of worked hard to get a bunch of just like school stuff out of the way my first 3 years, so that my last year there, I was really just focused on music as much as possible. So studying with Terry Lynn took me in like a wildly different direction. She pushed on me a lot more than Peter did. She didn't want me to edit. She wanted me to explore and add more stuff.
Just go for it, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My first lesson with her, she didn't say this in any kind of like a dig. It was just like a really hilarious, amazing question to think back on. She was like, so you don't really have any chops, do you? I was just like, oh, no, what? And I didn't understand it at the time, but it was kind of what I was talking about before, where it's like, oh, that's cool that your hands can do all that stuff, but you can't access any of it while you're playing music. So what good is it, right? And that was what Terry really imprinted on me, was like, just it's the same, I guess, a similar concept to Peter, and like everything needs to come out of the music. But she was like, well, but there's so much more you can do within the music. Like, well, what about this? What about that? And so with Peter, it was like we were taking lessons and he's recording them and we're analyzing stuff together at the same time. And with Terry, it was like, I'm going to sit down at this drum set, you're going to sit down at that drum set, and we're going to play this song, and you're going to sing me the melody, and we're going to play. And then we're going to trade, and we're going to trade choruses, and I'm going to expect you to not get lost in my playing, and I'm going to not get lost in your playing. And then we're going to trade eights or fours. And it was much more like, let's just do this. Let's just dive in and play. Yeah. So in that regard, she challenged me in a very different way. And then she also introduced me to something that I still do on a regular basis, and I still teach on a regular basis, which is all the Alan Dawson stuff.
Yeah, man.
The rudimental ritual, and then a lot of the, there's a lot of coordination exercises out of syncopation and stuff like that I still find myself teaching, and I still find myself going back and just doing and practicing, because, you don't keep up with it. Your hands and your feet and your coordination, it all goes out the window if you don't keep up with it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I just think, even though I can't do any of that stuff, I really, honestly, I can't. Like for me, if I can, as a player, if I can play, I don't know, paradiddles at, 180, 190, 200 BPM, if I can keep that going for 3 or 4 minutes, I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Way to go, Jamie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I come from a very different thing than the people that came up in the Alan Dawson stuff, right? Nate Morton is a good friend of mine. I'm sure you're familiar with Nate. He's
absolutely the voice, right? Yeah, the voice for a while, and
and still doing it to this day. And Nate tells me all the time, he was like, "Man, I don't have any chops," and I'm like, "You're full of."
I don't really believe that. I've seen him play the drums.
Yeah, I'm like, "You're full of crap, man. You've got all the chops that I want to have as a rock drummer." Right. But he's coming from that Berklee College of Music jazz program where he was like, I don't have any chops, or the Terry Lynn Carrington. Yeah, right. Or the Terry Lynn Carrington comment, you don't really have a lot of chops, do you? So I think, I always approach everything from my caveman, Cro-Magnon, John Bonham rock drummer brain, right? And it is I come at it from, it's not about the notes you play, it's about the notes you don't play. That's where the magic is, right? I think. I don't know.
I would say that same magic is actually 1,000% in jazz too.
Sure.
There's plenty of drummers that play a lot of stuff, and like anything can feel monotonous. It's funny how like crazy, busy, hard playing can feel so amazing, but then the third song of that, your ears are worn out and you're tired, and it starts to feel dynamically like it hasn't gone anywhere, right? So actually, this is a thing that Erskine always talks about too. The spaces are just as important as the notes that you're playing. And I feel like the more I have grown as a composer, and started to think more about like, not just what can I do on this song, but like, oh, what makes this song feel the best? And then in the larger picture, oh, wait, what makes this whole entire set feel good? Oh, I'm going to blow hard on this other tune that I have a vamp to solo on. Oh, so I'm going to make sure that I don't let too much fly and on these other songs. It's not really appropriate or it just feels out of place, so you start thinking in a bigger picture and it can really change how you think about that. And then, also what you're saying, like you're speaking my language in terms of what I grew up on too. Like I grew up listening to, let's say like a lot of 90s grunge rock, like listening to Dave Grohl play with Nirvana and Matt Cameron play with Pearl Jam. And I grew up on John Bonham and on Neil Peart, like, learning, which of course is a lot more drums with Neil and John, depending on the song. But, like that's actually where I grew up, was in more of the classic rock.
Yeah.
And then I discovered more of the jazz, in college. And part of it being what Ndugu is having me listen to, and Peter and Aron and Terry, and then also what my peers at school were listening to. It's like, oh, I don't even know who these people are,
Yeah.
It's funny how you think you know jazz because you listen to Miles Davis, but then like, oh, but I don't know any of the people who played in his band. Oh, well, then you haven't really checked out that much jazz, because they all are leaders in their own right, and they all have all these other records that you should check out that they all play on,
Right. Right.
There's a beautiful, like, intricate weave of all of these musicians playing on lots of different records together. That is very different from the I play in this band and that's all I do concept. Right? So it's not like you hear John Bonham playing on, like, 10 different bands' records. You hear him on Zeppelin.
Yes. The John Bonham.
But Philly Joe Jones, you go listen to Philly Joe Jones on hundreds of records.
Yes. And I think, maybe you can educate me a little bit. Because, I love this, because I learn so much doing this show. Right? Doing this podcast, I've learned more about music, interviewing musicians, than I ever did just as a listener. I mean, honestly, because it's perspective, right? And I think I have to be very careful, or I try to be very careful, of not name dropping and giving my resume to people, but I feel like in jazz, when you start reading somebody's bio, you see 40 names in it, right? And yeah. I think that's the world of jazz, is a lot of it's about who you have played with. And that's where your bona fides come from, or down here in the South, we say your bona fides, Yeah. Like, I've played with all these people, and that opens up a lot of doors, whereas it's different in rock music. When you start name dropping, everybody's like, that guy's a douche. Does that make sense, how I frame that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think that maybe the difference is that, not to say that there isn't community among a lot of different rock musicians or R&B musicians. There is, and there is a lot of crossover between different people's bands, or, so-and-so played in this band for a few years, and then they moved on and played with this band for a few years, especially with rhythm section players, right? Bass players, drummers, guitar players can definitely end up shifting through different bands.
Yeah.
But I think the main difference is that a lot of jazz musicians, they spend their time learning so much different music and being challenged by different music that they kind of look forward to the opportunities to, like, oh, I played this, like, a bunch of the same songs today as I did yesterday, but it was a totally different group. So it was a completely different take on all of that material.
Yeah. Yes.
So
I think
you're not trying to remake something that someone made. You're trying to do the opposite. You're trying to make it new again.
Right.
And so when you play with all of these different musicians, instead of thinking of it as like showing off, to me, it's more of an education. There's an education that on the bandstand playing with people that you cannot talk about. It's an experience only thing. And so knowing the difference of how it feels to play with this bass player versus that bass player, who are both amazing but totally feel different as a drummer to play with, I see it as more of a learning experience. Like, oh, this person has a different view or concept of time than I do.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you only want to play with someone who feels like Ray Brown, you're going to be very surprised if you play with someone that is more into Scott LaFaro, or, I mean, there's a million directions I can go, but the point just being that you're usually embracing the different as opposed to some expectation that you don't sound like what I am used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I tell people this all the time. I come from the, I mention John Bonham a lot because I think he's the ultimate rock drummer, right? But if you can,
many ways,
yes, but in bad ways too. If you can only play like Bonham played in Zeppelin, you're always going to be playing behind the beat in every band that you ever play in,
Yeah.
So I played in a band where that's what they wanted. And everything was behind the beat. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. And then, which is great, I think. But when you come out of that and you're in your next band and they're like, dude, you're dragging the shit out of this. You're like, gosh, I wonder why.
Yeah.
Why can't I do what this guy wants me to do? And it takes a minute to back up and go, oh my God, I did the Bonham thing for the last 3 or 4 years. And that's really all I know now. I think it's a mindset sort of thing. And I think education, we use that word a lot in, where did you further your education? Man, every gig that you did probably while you were attending USC was an education in and of itself, I would imagine. Am I right?
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like you go to school and you learn all of these things, and as with so much of academia, it's kind of like, oh, that's so nice that you learned all of those things. They don't mean anything to me yet, though. And then you step out in the real world and you start performing for real and you start interfacing with other musicians and, places that are having you play music and, business owners. And suddenly you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about. Oh, that's what he meant by that comment. And, these little things that you can't totally understand why, like an elder musician is saying that to you as a teacher.
Yeah.
You can't really have the perspective until you have some similar situation arise. And those situations, some of them arise in school, but more of them definitely you run into outside of school. And this is all my personal experience. So the other thing is that some musicians started like playing and performing a lot younger than I did. So they already are having those experiences when they are in college. And then others are more like me. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't get the opportunity to learn that yet, watch out for this. When people say this, be careful, That's interesting things to watch out for. Or, hey, when you play, like, you really got to mean this, otherwise no one's going to believe it. And then you get on the bandstand and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't believe that when I played it, and that's why nobody else believed it either. Oh boy, okay.
Right on. Yeah, for sure. And I think, I think, how do I want to say this where it makes sense and I don't spend 8 minutes trying to explain it? I look at, some of the folks that you've toured with and recorded with, the name that immediately jumps out to me is Larry Goldings, right? Because Larry has played with everybody on earth, I think. In your world.
I mean, just the number of the all-time greatest drummers that he's played with is off the charts.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the folks that I've had as guests on this show, there's a common thread, and one of those is Larry Goldings. Alan Ferber, I see, in your CV, David Benoit, Billy Childs. I mean, my God, but I think we get too focused on, oh, he's played with him. Wow, that's awesome. But yeah, what as sidemen, so many drummers, especially in my world, the rock world, we get lost in, oh, well, I toured with, and I'm not taking anything away with anybody, but I've toured with, Collective Soul for the last 8 years. Johnny's a good friend of mine. He's been playing in Collective Soul for a long time, but Johnny Rabb has played with everybody. You know what I mean? We get lost as, well, I'm the guy that tours in Motley Crue, or I'm the guy that tours in Whitesnake. And it's like, yeah, but where have you been for the last, 30 years, right? I don't know how to explain that, and I'm spending 8 minutes explaining it. That's what I didn't want to do when I came into this question. But we get lost as sidemen, and you've got this great record coming out, here in just a few weeks. I think May 13th is the street date for Shine Thru.
Yep.
And, when I go through your PR folder for Shine Thru, it's, it says here, that basically you swore that you wouldn't do this until you had something unique to say, right? So let me ask this, and we'll transition a little bit into your record that you've done the composing on. How do you compose? Do you approach it rhythmically? Do you sit down at a piano? Do you sit down with a guitar? How have you approached bringing up your own compositions as a band leader?
Well, I'm gonna do two things here. I'm gonna go backwards and take apart the other thing that you said right before that.
Okay.
Which, so I think there's a lot of musicians that would really love to get a solid gig, like you're talking about with Johnny, right? It's like, oh yeah, I play in Collective Soul. Like, that's my bread and butter that keeps me semi to very busy all year long. And then I have these other things that I get to do.
Yeah.
And then that makes some people really happy. And then that also makes some people really unhappy. And what I mean by that is that some people like the consistency or the knowledge of like comfort. Like I know I have these gigs this year. And then other people are a little bit more like, oh, I would go crazy if I had to play the exact same music the same way for months on end. You know, I like to be challenged to do different things all the time. So I think that's maybe a two-part thing of like opportunity and do you want that, right? Because a lot of people take those opportunities, but then they kind of get worn out on them, and they need to like let go of that to go do something else, you know?
Yeah.
I have quite a few friends who were in big bands for a while, and then they just needed to move on to do something else, you know? And a part of that might also be leading into your second question, which is like wanting to release your own music, or maybe feeling like, oh, I have been spending my whole life or my whole musical life in nothing but support of other people. And like, if you erase me, it doesn't matter. They're just going to replace me with another drummer and it won't change anything, right? Like the band could still sound just as good and most of the audience doesn't know. So there's that other idea of like, oh, well, I have some other musical things that I have to say and I want to put them out there and see if they strike anybody, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, I remember very specifically when I was like fresh out of college and playing around town a lot and hosting some jam sessions and playing at smaller, you know, weird little clubs all over the city with my friends. You know, it was just one of those things that we wanted to play all the time. But then everybody wanted like a CD. Give me a CD of your music. So there was a whole lot of people who were just going into the studio and just cutting basically a demo in my mind, but then releasing it as like a record of some sort.
Yeah.
And it really, it became a business card. And that, I don't know why I couldn't get behind that. It's not that I didn't respect the people that were doing that. It was like all good and well, like, yeah, you want to do that. That's awesome. I just don't want to spend, you know, a few $1,000s to go record a whole bunch of standards that a lot of people have already recorded and done like incredible versions of that I keep coming back to. I don't want to do that. I just didn't want to do that. So my thought was, I don't want to go do a record of my own until I felt I had, instead of saying something unique, I think maybe it's more appropriate to say something unique to me, something that I musically had to say.
Yeah, well, you've given me the perfect segue to get my catchphrase in here. The good news is today, in today's music industry, the good news is anybody can put out a great record. The bad news is anybody can put out a great record. Right?
It's true. It's true and it's true. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I think, you know, so I will please continue. I'm sorry to interrupt and interject there, but that's the world we live in. Everybody has a great record.
You know, I wish that was true, but there's a lot of bad records out there too.
Well, yeah. Touche.
I think that's, is that Duke Ellington's quote? There's only two kinds of music, good music and bad music.
I quote that every day. Every day.
Yeah, you know, like I am not able to judge my music as good or bad. All I can judge is that I was very serious about the time and thought I've put into a lot of it, and the people that I like to play with and want to play with, and that I thought would help me to express my music as best I could. And I kind of see it as like just the beginnings of my contribution to the musical world. And I don't know that, it's like I can't judge how it's going to go. And popularity isn't always the judge of good or bad music either.
It never is. It never is.
So I just see it.
Yeah.
I just see it as this is the start of my contribution to the lineage of music. And I've been writing a lot more. So I hope to have another record out maybe next year or the beginning of the following year. It's a long cycle to get everything done. But erasing that, to answer your question about the compositional process, my website and bio kind of mentions it a little bit too, but I basically just feel like I'm really lucky to have played with a lot of really great composers. And by being able to listen to them talk about their music and having conversations with them and then getting to play their music and then getting all these, like I said, the experience side of things, like all these different comments. Oh yeah, could you think about like maybe doing this here, or keep this more open and then this part is more driving, and then, like all these little comments kind of add up to their own education after a while, especially when you're reading other people's brand new music, or you're reading someone's music and, Eric Harland was the drummer on the record, and you're like, holy crap, I'm never going to sound like Eric Harland. I mean, I don't want to because I'm not Eric, but goddamn, I look up to everything he does musically, right? So,
yeah.
And so you get to say like, okay, and then you get to hear from a composer saying, oh yeah, that's totally cool what he did here. But you know what? Like, this section, like, I don't like it like that anymore because we've been playing it differently, and now I kind of want it to go towards this other thing. And so you start seeing how different people and different bands can kind of change the perception of music, right? So I find that to be very fascinating and very important. And that's also a kind of do a little callback. That's the reason that so many jazz musicians are kind of in round robins in different settings with different leaders. But this person's playing bass and this person's playing drums on this tour. And so all of that stuff adds up into kind of that educational experience into thinking about how I want to put together my own music. As far as the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty of composing, I feel like most of the songs on the record were written in pretty short amounts of time, and mainly by two things: either when I'm walking my dog in my neighborhood, or when I'm on hikes out in the woods or up in the mountains here, and I'm just like singing a melody and like kind of letting it develop in my brain and just trying to keep my head empty of other stuff, and then singing it into my voice memos on my phone. And then I sit down at the piano and kind of work out, okay, what is the melody? What is this? Do I really hear it like that, or do I want to change anything, or what's different if I go here or go there? And then maybe there's a groove in my head, maybe not. I feel like actually most times the last thing I think about is what I'm going to play on the drums. And I'm thinking more about like, okay, what's the melody doing? Where's the harmony? Where's like tension and release? This phrase feels long, or this phrase feels short, and then I kind of rebuild it and walk around some more singing it. And if it doesn't make sense to me, if it feels like I'm forcing anything, then that's kind of like a pretty quick asterisk. Like, okay, so something's not right here. So I don't know what it is, but something's not right. And then secondarily, and super important, I've written the song. It sounds good to me. It kind of makes sense. And then I bring it in front of a bunch of great musicians, and we play it in a session, and it's just like, oh, yeah, this is cool. Hey, what do you think about this? Oh, this is weird here. I don't know what to play on this. You know, you start getting commentary from people who you respect and love to make music with. And so that workshopping a song. And then also another important one is like, hey, you don't go and record a song if you've never played it live, because, oh man, we played it live and that section that I thought was so great felt like it was too short, or felt like it lasted too long, or, you know, people aren't comfortable blowing on this section, or I don't know how to play this yet from the drums. Like, I'm just stepping on things because I'm still thinking about the melody and the bass line too much, and I'm not thinking about a third part for the drums that kind of glues it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's the writing of the song melodically usually is a short, quick thing, and then trying to figure out like the architecture of the song is something that I find is more of my time investment in the compositional part. And I'm lucky to be around a lot of great composers who are thinking in different ways, and I ask questions all the time. I mean, just constantly. So like Josh Nelson, who's on the record, he's an incredible composer and pianist. So, hey, what do you think about this chord? I don't know. It feels funny. It feels like it's not going anywhere. Like, what do you think? And then he'll rattle off like 5 or 6 different things. Like, oh, well, you could think this way, or you could try this, or are you hearing this color? You know, and suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, I like that one and that one. Let me go home and play it now and think about it. Or like someone like Billy Childs, who writes incredible, like highly developed compositions. So there's like all these parts that keep repeating and keep coming back, but they keep building and changing slightly and getting more intense or more open. You know, it's like the way that he reuses material is incredible. So the inspiration comes from a lot of different places too. So it's
I get it, and man, it amazes me of all, you know, I've had, I don't know, 12, 15 drummers on this show that are great composers, and they all say pretty much what you just said, and that is, oh no, it always starts with the melody. It never comes from what time signature is this going to be in? You know, here's that cool, you know, Radamacue lick that I worked up, you know, at practice the other day, or you know, I wanted it to be. Nobody has ever said, well, I came up with this great polyrhythmic idea on the kit. It never goes there. It's always, you know, I always think of this melodically first before I get to any of the drumming stuff, right? Which I find really interesting, because as a drummer, you know, just a drummer, I approach everything rhythmically, right? But I don't have that compositional gene that the rest of you guys have. Like, you know, I can sit down and come up with lyrics or, you know, a melody, but I'm always thinking about it as, well, what are the drums going to be doing here? You know, I never can.
Then I challenge you to do the opposite.
I know. And that's what they all say to me as well. Like, hey, get away from that. You got to, you know, which I find so interesting. But you said something in there. We never go record a tune that we haven't played live. The great Warren Haynes, you know, from Government Mule and the Allman Brothers Band, you know, there's a great quote from him. He said, we as an industry have done this backwards for 75 years. And that is, we record a record, then we go out and learn how to play the songs for 75 nights on the road. And,
yep.
We ought to be doing this the other way around. We should be playing all these songs out on the road for a year or whatever, and then go into the studio and cut them, because they'll tell you how they want to be played out on the road.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And I mean, even so the material on the record, there's only one song that we never played live, and that's because it was purposefully built as a layered thing. It's kind of a short vignette on the record. It's called Vistas. But everything else, we definitely played live, and I didn't only play with that band. So some of those songs I played in trio format or quartet format. And, by workshopping those things, you get to know oh, this works or that works, but this never works. No matter who's in the band, this concept always seems to get weird, or it doesn't really sit right, or it doesn't move how I want it to. The difference of what he's talking about really is that if you can get out and play those songs to the point to where the musicians on the recording session don't need to be looking at charts. They don't need to be thinking about what's big or small or what's the dynamics that we need here. That stuff's all been worked out on the bandstand and probably been, like he was saying, tried a handful of different ways. And you realize oh yeah, this could work this way. This could work that way. It's really about how we pay attention to this section or that section. And then playing it live, you just start doing those things. You don't have to think about it anymore. But that he is 100% correct in my eyes. And that, unfortunately, is still the case, which is people are, sight reading on recording sessions or only rehearsing for a few days before recording sessions, trying to get a good take, and then trying to sell that and then trying to go on the road after. And then, like he said, that's where you suddenly learn oh man, I wish I had done this on the record.
Right. I mean,
and you can't go backwards,
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, you know what? Let's do a live record, because now we all know how to play this music.
Right.
So let's do a live recording of this.
Well, and I mean, there's some of these, idioms in the music industry, a good song, don't care who sings it. Right. I think a good song will tell you how it wants to be played. Right. If you have the fundamental building blocks there, after you've gone through it 2 or 3 times, I tell guys all the time that, guys that I've been in a band with for 30 years, we all end up back together and it's the same, songs or whatever. But I just say a good song will tell you what tempo it wants to be played at, right? You can't make a 120 beat a minute song sound good at 80 beats a minute. You just can't do it, right?
I don't know about that. Here's the only thing I'll say about that is I would say that because, all right, so maybe I'm biased because, again, I'm coming out of, the jazz language. And so one of the things that makes certain recordings of a song for me are actually the tempo and the thought process. And so this thing that's normally a ballad in 4, oh, well, he turned it into a faster version of 6, and the changes feel great and the melody sits really well and the singer can phrase everything different, and it's just messing with your perspective, and you're ooh, I know that song. And it feels so different, but it still feels good. So to me, that is the beauty of what really incredible arrangers can do, which is they can take something that you've known in one way and shift your perspective on it and make you think it's almost a different song because they have flipped the script on you so much. And that can happen from harmony. That can happen from like changing a meter or changing a feel. And that can also come from changing instrumentation, right? So
yeah, I did a very poor job of of saying that, basically, because what you're saying is the truth. You know, I set that up badly, I think, or you know, not the way maybe I had thought I was going to say that, and it just, you know, like I say, I chase every rabbit hole. I just feel like, you know, there are certain things that maybe me as a drummer, I can't do that a great arranger can. Does that make sense? Because at the end of the day, if you've got 5 guys in the room, you know, a couple of guitarists, a bass player, a singer, a drummer, the drummer is going to be the arranger for the most part in that particular, you know, setting that I was explaining. So yes, a great arranger can say, yeah, let's not do this in 4. Let's do this in 6 now. And wow, mind warp, right? So I get what you're saying, and you're 100% accurate and correct. It's just me playing the role of the arranger. I don't have some of those skills to make the 120 beats a minute song sound good at 80, perhaps. But a good arranger can do that.
Right. See, I guess the difference is thinking about like, not thinking about the tempo being a hard and fast rule, but just knowing that, like, okay, I want the melody to be a hard and fast rule, right? So I'm going to rebuild things around the melody.
Yes.
And I'm feeling it this way, and then I change the harmony, and then because I changed the harmony, now I feel differently about that tempo. It feels too fast. Like I want to hang out on that melody longer now because it sits different in the harmony. I think a better way to think about what you're saying is that, or what you were saying previously is that a really great song doesn't need a great arrangement, right?
Yes.
A really great song that the band knocks out of the park. Well, a great singer could walk out on the front of the stage with nothing but an acoustic guitar, and the song is so complete. There's so much fabulous material in there that it comes across just as well to an audience that way as it does with the full band playing the arrangement all the way. And, you know, just the nuts and bolts of the music are so solid that everybody's on board either way.
Yeah. I think, you know, like in my band, we spend so much time looking for, well, where's the guitar solo going to go? Right. Or you know, and our guitarist sometimes will go, man, this doesn't need a solo. It really, like, I don't need that for this piece of music. It doesn't need that. So I think a good song will tell you what it wants and what it needs.
Yes. I'm 100% there with you. And then there's always a few asterisks with like who the performer is, and oh wow, they could just do some things with that song that most people can't, you know?
Yeah.
Like watching, I have definitely gone back and watched about 1,000 times that Prince's guitar solo on While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Yeah, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Yeah, holy Christ.
Yes.
Like, you thought he's done, and then he's just taking it up another notch, and then another notch, and then another notch. And you're like, if someone said, oh, yeah, can we put a 5-minute guitar solo in here? everyone in the band would be like, "What is wrong with you?"
Right. Until Prince Rogers Nelson walks out on stage and does exactly that, and you go, "Oh shit! Yeah, I get it. I get it now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, I'm picking an exceptional example. I'm well aware of that. But, there's always room for different. There's always room for surprises in music. And I think that's the thing that always brings me back. There's always, every time you play a song with different people in different places, there's room for new. There's room for something surprising. And that's why I'm never bored playing music. There's always something new to discover. There's always something or someone else's take on things to discover,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. We've spent so much time talking about all this stuff, and this has been a great episode. I mean, it really has. Shine Thru is such a great sounding record. Where did you guys record this at?
We recorded it in Hollywood at an old studio called Sage and Sound. It is now closed, unfortunately. It closed about 6 months after I recorded in it.
Okay.
Someone had bought out the building and then never did anything with it. So it's still just sitting there. But my friend and the producer on the record, Jeff Babko, who deserves a billion shout-outs because he's totally the man. I could not have done this without him. He's just like the best advice always. He and I went out to breakfast, and he was just like, "Hey, we ran into Victor and Drizo at breakfast, and Victor was just like, yeah, you should just come by and check out my space," which was Sage and Sound. And so we finished breakfast. I came home. I had to take care of a couple things, and then I just drove down to Hollywood to his house, to his studio, and walked in and just checked the place out and was like way into it because I was specifically looking for a studio that was like a room sound where I wasn't trying to have everybody perfectly isolated, right? So the only person that was isolated was saxophone, and that was just because he was running some electronics and stuff that didn't allow him to do those things and be in the same room as us. But everybody else was in one big room with baffles. And at the same exact time that I went in to check out the space, I got to meet Chris Steffen. And Chris is an incredible engineer and was like Victor's studio partner, along with a great bass player named Sean Hurley. So the three of them all shared that space. And so Chris, I was just like, he was so awesome to just immediately meet and talk to and talk about music with. And then we recorded it, and he clearly, it's his space. It was his board. Everything was set up by him. So he was completely comfortable. And then after we recorded it, I talked to Jeff, and I was just like, I think we should just have Chris mix it. Like, he knows what we did in the room those 2 days, and he understood everything, how it happened and how everything's laid out. And he's not going to try and like turn it into something that it's not. He's going to just like honor what we recorded that day. So the pandemic got in the way of everything.
Of course.
Chris ended up, his wife is an actress. He had to go to Canada with her for something that she was shooting. And while she was there, she was already pregnant with their second child, and the pandemic shut everything down. And so Chris literally got stuck in Canada because he could not come home, because if he came home, he wouldn't be allowed back into Canada with his pregnant wife and his 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So he was literally like, dude, I'm here. I'm going to do some rough mixes. And he's sent them on to me. And then I don't know, everything kind of felt weird at the beginning of the pandemic. So I just pulled back big time. And I was like, I'm just going to put this on hold for a little while. And so we did not actually come back to mixing until he returned to the States, which was in April of 2021. So we had like this long year of not really working on the record at all, of letting it go. And then he and I dove right back in when he got back in town, and we got the whole thing mixed in like a month and a half. But his sound is clearly stamped on there. I asked him specifically, I was like, I want you to feel like you are a sixth or seventh member of the band.
Yeah.
And I want you to like bring what you do in. And he's an incredible engineer, so he did both bringing himself in and then also like having everything clean and nice if I wanted it. But we didn't really go that route. We kind of he did the first couple of mixes, and then except for like a couple of specific things that I didn't like, which was like just some interesting saturation that it just felt like it was getting in the way on some tracks. Like I loved everything he was doing. And then when we got in front of the same set of speakers with both of our ears right next to each other, it really made a world of difference in getting the mixes like dialed in.
Yeah.
And then I'm a copious note taker. So I did lots of listening and just paying attention to what's working. We didn't need to edit anything. There wasn't a ton of overdubs on tracks in any way, shape, or form. Everything was recorded live in the room. And so there's no take on there that is like the first half of one song and the back half of another song. Everything is complete takes as they were recorded. And then mastered by one of the greatest musicians I know alive, a great drummer, bass player, keyboard player named Nate Wood. He mastered it. And that's how you get to hear what you hear today.
Well, it's such a good record. I've listened to it a couple of times and I'm just like, wow, yeah, man, that's where it's at. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's so good. Let me ask this. I know we've, hit, Friday, May the 13th is when the record drops and all that good stuff. Are there going to be physical copies, physical formats available for folks to order from someplace? Or is this going to be one of those go stream it wherever you can kind of things?
It is. Well, I think everything these days is a go stream it wherever you can.
Yeah, I know. But please tell me there's going to be physical format copies available.
There is CDs and vinyl available.
Okay, good.
And they are both already printed and in my possession.
Okay, good.
And so the single, which is called Unknown Territory, which is the first track on the record, will be released on Friday, April 15th, I believe. And that there's actually a video that goes with that one that I've been working on with an amazing videographer and photographer out here named Nicole Caldwell. And then all the pre-saves and everything will be available from that. And then there will be hard copies of CD available by Amazon, and yes, you can buy it on Tidal and Deezer, and it'll be on Bandcamp. The vinyl won't be coming through the label. That'll just be coming from me, I believe. Okay. We didn't do a huge run of vinyl, but yes. Yeah, so physical is available. Good. CDs for those people who like high fidelity sounds and don't want squashed MP3s. and vinyl for the vinyl lovers out there, which I am coming around to more and more these days, mostly because I don't know exactly how old you are, but for me, growing up, there's certainly something awesome about listening to a record from start to finish and starting to see like a whole arc of that, as opposed to here's 10 singles and it doesn't matter what order you listen to them in,
right.
you know?
Yes.
Like as you were talking about, like Led Zeppelin, right? When one song finishes on almost every single Led Zeppelin record, my brain already starts listening, like I'm already imagining the next song.
Yes.
Yeah, because you listen to them in the order that they set. And so there's something really beautiful about that to me. So, and there's also something that's kind of nice about, I listen to 18 to 20 minutes of music on one side of vinyl, and then I flip it over and I listen to the other side. And there's that physical action of having to walk over to the turntable and flip it over is a decision that you're making, as opposed to I just hit play on streaming and I walked away and then I made breakfast and then I answered this phone call and I walked outside and then I came back in and half the record had played and I didn't even know what happened.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'm with you there.
Yeah,
man.
I really love that concept of like the physical and hearing the larger picture of the song. And, you know, I can't say that it'll do that for everybody, but the goal was that, like, you know, when you listen to the record, it has this, at least some tracks hopefully have this feeling of like sucking you in, where you stop thinking about what you're doing or paying attention to, you know, time. You're just kind of in that space.
Yeah, man. That's where it's at. I mean, I think that's where where you get the juice from, right? Is sitting down and listening to the darn thing. So I want to be respectful of your time. I've gone way over, but this has been such a great episode. I mean, it really has. A couple of things that I want to hit on real quick before I let you get on with your afternoon. And one of those is you are still teaching in LA. You teach all the time. Tell folks where they can find you online if we have listeners that want to, you know, reach out to you. Where can people find you easiest?
I think the easiest, I mean, it's, I guess it's pretty standard these days. The easiest is to reach out to me through my website, which is just danschnelle.com. I would feel remiss not to spell it, which is DANSCHNELLE.com, because someone invariably always leaves the E off the end of my name. You can follow me on Instagram at the same thing, just Dan Schnelle, and reach out to me there. I teach a lot of private lessons out of my garage studio, and I still go and do master classes and clinics at a lot of places, at USC, at CalArts, at Saddleback College. I've been teaching combos, or, you know, like groups at CSUN, which is Cal State Northridge here, which has a really great program, also run by a fantastic drummer named Tina Raymond. I think those are probably the best places.
Okay.
Without just giving out my email address.
Yeah, well, we probably don't want to do that, but I mean, we can if you really want to, but you know, if you contact me through my website, it comes straight to my email, and that is a great way to reach out. And I'm very serious about my teaching, mostly because I can't not teach, because I have learned so much from all of my teachers, and I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to reach out to so many of them still, and they
all my favorite teachers were never worried about time and money. They were worried about information.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, this is important stuff. This is what you need to go work on. This is what you need to think about. And they have all, from Peter to Aron to Ndugu to Terry Lynn, they have all given me so much more, like, way after the fact too, in emails and phone calls and conversations at gigs and stuff, you know, random questions about this or that, and what do you think about this, you know. So the teaching is really just kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways it's built into the music these days. I've just glean so much great information from other people that would be totally selfish of me to keep it all to myself.
Yeah, man, that's awesome too. And you know, the world thanks you for that. I mean, that's what this show is about, is spreading the joy of what we do. And you know, I've said this until I'm purple in the face, but drumming has such a brotherhood and sisterhood around it. It's such a community that is unlike other instruments, I think. You know, I'm not trying to say anything bad about bass players or guitarists, but, you know, when I go see a drummer play live, I'm coming home with something new. I'm ripping him or her off somehow, some way. And I will absolutely give that credit. I'll be like, yeah, I ripped that lick off Dan Schnelle, you know, for sure. So I just think it's such a great community that we've built. And that's what I hope this show is kind of like the drummer hangout. That's what I want this to be. I really do. I want this podcast to be, hey, you know, I'm a metalhead, but I heard this, you know, awesome jazz record called Shine Thru by Dan Schnelle, and it turned me on to new things. That's what I want this to be. And I appreciate you so much for taking the time to do this and share with all of us, you know, about your life, your journey, and your new record. So let's sell out your vinyl, since it's a limited run. Let's sell that out. And I'll say this, kids, if you want a copy of Dan Schnell's Shine Thru, buy a physical format. It pays Dan more money. I promise you it does. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, go listen to it on Spotify or whatever. That's all great if they just want you to discover it, but buy a physical format copy of this record. It's so good. Dan, thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Jamie, I really appreciate it. I love your larger concept for the podcast. I'd love to come on another time. We can talk about totally different stuff. We can get nerdy about drums all day long. I got lots of vintage gear in here sitting next to me to talk about.
Good.
But I really, yes, but thank you so much for having me and shining a light on what I do. I really appreciate it. And I hope some folks out there listening will get some worthwhile information from it as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. And we will absolutely have you back soon. And we'll nerd out on Slingerland, Leedy, Ludwig, Rogers. I don't know what your pill of poison is, but we can talk about any of the above and all of the above.
Well, how about all of the above?
Yes.
I'm sitting in front of a Gretsch round badge and a late 60s Slingerland and a MIJ snare drum right now.
Good. Yes, we can absolutely geek out on all that, but we'll have you back sometime real soon because I've really enjoyed this and I think you have a lot to offer our crowd. So we'll absolutely do it again at your leisure. Dan, thanks so much, man. We'll be in touch real soon.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Jamie, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, man, you too. Thanks. All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 143 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. Many thanks to Dan Schnelle for taking time out of his busy schedule and coming on the podcast and talking with us. Really had a good time talking with him. And again, the album is Shine Thru. Pick that up wherever fine music can be found. Hey, I'm going to ask the same favor that I always ask. If you want to help out the show, please share a link with a friend. Whatever platform you're using to listen into this podcast, leave us a star rating or review. That helps us to continue to grow. We do answer every single email that we get here at the podcast. The Drum Shuffle Podcast at gmail.com is that email address. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. Your homework assignment, as it is always, is go see some live music if it is safe for you to do so before it all goes away. Thanks for listening, and until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.